Wow, what a good project we are taking on right now. So Move to Amend is a coalition of hundreds of organizations and hundreds of thousands of individuals committed to social and economic justice, ending corporate rule, and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to the people, not corporate interests. And reminder about our goals. Our goal is to pass the We the People Amendment to make clear that artificial entities do not have constitutional rights and that money is not speech, and to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make the real promise of American democracy through constitutional renewal. Here's our amendment, just in case anyone forgot. Section 1, artificial entities such as corporations do not have constitutional rights. And Section 2, money is not free speech. And our strategy. This does tie into communication. This will tie in. Our strategy right now is building a grassroots democracy movement, coalition building, building a broad and diverse multiracial movement, community organizing, not just activism, focus on local organizing, and our primary target right now is not actually legislators, but the American people at this time, to educate our fellows and build our base. So our agenda for tonight for the Conflict Resolution and Communication webinar is an introduction, which Jessica will give, talking about affiliate support and how this topic came up, and we realized we needed to do a webinar on it. And we'll go over the fact that this is difficult, it's really challenging, and divisive work. It's not easy work, and no one's going to make it easy for us. We have opposition the whole time. And we'll go over the topic of anticipating conflict so that it's destigmatized and your group is prepared to deal with conflict before conflict arises and have those skills, and it's out in the open. We'll go over concrete structure, skills, and resources, and we will end with talking about the unified principles and strategy, the common ground that we share in Move to Amend groups that is never up for debate and should be a go-to when conflicts do arise, to hold us together and keep us on common ground. So, introduction. Jessica, please start us off with affiliate woes and the tales of conflict that you have come across over doing affiliate support calls.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So this topic came up because there's inherently conflict that's going to arise when you have human beings, complex creatures, doing complex work like we're doing. It's inevitable on some level that there will be conflict, and it comes up all the time. If your affiliate is dealing with conflict, you are not the only one, I guarantee. And so we thought that it would be a good idea to provide some tools and resources for folks so that we can have policies and procedures in place for when these things do come up, so that it doesn't have to be awkward and it doesn't have to be a guessing game when this conflict does arise, but we know how we deal with it and we go to our policies and try to find a quick and appropriate solution. So let's see. I'll start with just some examples of types of conflict that arise that I've heard of within affiliates. Lots of different things come up. And certain things that I've noticed are personality clashes, right? It's inevitable when we have lots of good people doing good work. We're all a little different. And so sometimes there's just personalities that collide that we have to deal with and work together and try to navigate around that sort of a conflict. People have different leadership styles. That comes up all the time when you have a decentralized way of handling an affiliate. You've got multiple people in power. You know, there's going to be conflict. It makes sense. And in order to be a strong leadership team, we have to learn how to navigate that and use all of our different skill sets to have an effective leadership. Conflict arises often when we're adding new folks to an already existing group. You know, we have these things in place sometimes as an affiliate, and we're trying to bring in new people and grow our group all the time. But sometimes that can be uncomfortable. You know, you have fresh people coming in, and they often have these ideas and ways they want to do things, and that can be uncomfortable for people who are already in the affiliate who, you know, have a set way of doing things. And So that's hard to open ourselves up to new ideas and to also maintain the good processes that we already have. So that can create conflict. And then we've got, this is a complex issue, and it's political and it's intellectual, and that's hard. So navigating differences of opinion about tactics and plans can be difficult. Deciding what our affiliate group is going to do can be difficult, which tasks we're going to take on, how much emphasis and resources we're going to put into certain tasks. So that's difficult, right? Just what are we going to do as a group, and making those decisions together can be hard. Often isms come up. I call them isms. Sexism, racism, classism, ableism, homophobia. These things exist within us. No matter how aware a person we are, we have our prejudices, and they come out. And especially when we're in situations where we're passionate about what we're doing and we care a lot about it, emotions can run high. And we have a culture at Move to Amend of dealing with our prejudices and really examining them and having a good, strong power analysis. So it's inevitable, I think, that certain isms will come up, and the way to move past them and to deal with them and create a culture where it's okay to talk about those things is very important. We experience differences of strategy. Everybody has a different idea of how things should be done. If we can get to a decision of what we're going to do, there's the question of how we're going to do it, and that creates conflict as well. There's a conflict that comes up when there are competing projects. Some folks within an affiliate group might want to take on their issue, and some other folks might be involved in a different issue. And because the ideas of corporate personhood and money as speech relate to so many different issues, sometimes there's competition. We only have so much time and resources, right? So we have to figure out what we're going to take on, and that can bring conflict. And then there's unequal distribution of work. You have a group of people, and some people tend to take on more work than others. Some people tend to step back. And so conflicts can arise when there's an unequal distribution of work, and if there's unclear communication and ways of dealing with these things, that can boil. So we want to put policies in place so we can deal with all of these inevitable problems. And as Robin said before, destigmatize the idea of conflict. It's going to happen, and actually it can be really healthy. I've talked with many affiliate groups throughout the country. Almost all of them have some sort of a conflict to do with the things that I've mentioned before. And so these are just a couple of the ways that we can see conflict in our affiliate groups, and I'm sure there are more. And the bigger we grow and the more things we take on, the more conflict there's going to be. So those are some examples. And so now let's talk about how to deal with that.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. I wonder if any of those resonated with the 7 affiliate members who are on the call right now. Jessica mentioned basic personality issues, strategy, all the things she just mentioned, and how common it is. So probably, oh yes, Kit says, oh yeah, all right, good. So Jessica's the real thing. She really has been doing affiliate support calls, and these really have been the problems. We can confirm. Next slide. So, right, we've come together to do, it's amazing. Let's just first of all say it's amazing that people are coming together to do political work out of pure political passion as total volunteers. There's 24 hours in the day. Everyone has a life. And we have come together. So the fact that an affiliate group even exists is pretty amazing. A group of people coming together, sometimes near strangers. And we know that even working with people you love and your family to make decisions can sometimes be hard. It's really difficult to do that with a bunch of strangers. There's not necessarily accountability or affection between the people in the group right off the bat. And this is not easy. Society is not going to make this job easy for us. It's not the way it's easy when you go to Disneyland. They have the the cordons off so you can go in line, and then they give you the sticker, and there's like signs for the restrooms everywhere. They're trying to make it easy for you to spend money and be at their theme park. No one's trying to make it easy for us to amend the Constitution. In fact, it's the exact opposite. There are powerful forces against us. So there are powerful divisive forces against us. So we need to be aware of that. So this is a visceral example of that. These are students at UC Berkeley who are sticking together, although there is a powerful police force that is trying to break them up and make them feel horrible. So that's an example of how we need to be. We need to be tight, and we need to stick together, and that's how we're going to have the people power that we need. So just acknowledging that first, that there's a reason why it's so hard. UC Davis, okay. And yeah, so we all have real lives, right? So the people who are coming in to be at your affiliate group all have real lives. So you have a real life where you go to work and go grocery shopping and have bills and feel exhausted and kids and old parents and people to look after and pets and all that stuff. This is real, right? We can talk as much as we want about the lofty ideals of democracy and amending the Constitution and all that, but in reality, right, when you get onto the ground and you're doing the actual work, which is what needs to be done, you're dealing with real life, regular days, and real people. So there are lots of different personalities. I thought people might appreciate these favorite personalities from some stories, right? So there's going to be people with different personalities. Everyone's a personality, and they're coming together in the group. And then there's the real context. If you're going to city council, it's not glorious, billowing flags or like the revolution or something. It's fluorescent lighting and, paper cups of water and a lot of obstacles. And just a lot of lack of energy. And yeah, so that's the real context. And then a town is a real context. It's just concrete. So that's what we're dealing with, and that is a situation in which conflicts arise, right? They arise between real people on a real day when someone's coming off work, coming to the meeting, and tired, hungry, or whatever, and you're dealing with an actual neighborhood where people know each other, and it's a real context. So as Muslim affiliates, we need to expect these kinds of issues to arise and be prepared for conflict before they arise, right? So you could show this webinar. That might not be the best choice, but you could show this webinar to your group. But I recommend devoting a meeting to this topic. We're going to cover some tips and some skills that can be used to deal with conflict, and just destigmatize it. Be like, oh, by the way, it's so great to meet. Here we are, all 7 of us, and we're going to have conflict, so let's talk about how we're going to deal with it in advance so that it doesn't splinter us apart, so that they're not, because it's too important. The work we're doing is too important, and it's not actually about any one individual's ego and the project they think is the most important. What matters more than anything is that we stick together. Truly. That unity, of course, with our platform, but that unity is what's most important. If we splinter off and aren't supporting one another, we're as good as gone. So it's not okay to just say, oh, I don't agree with the group. I'm going to go off and do this thing, and have someone else go off and do that thing. It just dissipates and it's gone. So sticking together needs to be a priority. We need to focus on common ground and anticipate these conflicts. Say, by the way, other affiliate groups have the issue of breaking up. One person going to one project, another people going to another project, and getting catty and arguing about it. We're not going to let that happen to us. We're going to have common ground, and we're going to move forward as a group. So some of the basic structure, preventative structure, is going to be things that we've had webinars on before, group and meeting structure. So we have a lot of resources on this. We have the affiliate guide, just basically the basic stuff, meeting regularly, using agendas, and getting personal commitment. So this is important too. You don't want fair weather participation. You want actual commitment to the group, and you're going to have to plan and rotate roles and responsibilities. So you have to accept folks who come in for what they can do, right? If they can only do one thing, Get them to do what they're good at. Have them do what they're good at, and then they can be committed to doing that job. And you don't want it to fall all on one person's shoulders. That's one of the main conflicts, that one person's doing everything and then they feel like they're in charge of the group, that kind of thing. But just have everyone really get out what their personal capacity is, how many hours a week they can devote, what they're best at, and respect that. Respect the role that they can play. And then in terms of reserving space for meetings and taking notes and things like that, you've got to plan to rotate it. And that just needs to be a bottom line. So when you get those commitments, if you have a group, you've just got to have a plan to rotate responsibilities. You can't think that it's going to work out to have it all fall on one person. Oh, I'll do it. I have the time. I'm retired. I have the time. I'll do it. You can't do it that way. You have to have it rotate through the group, or you're going to have imbalance, and it's going to create conflict later. And then also participating in the national calls and check-ins gives a broader context to your group and gives a stronger foundation for your group and the work that you're doing as a group. So just a strong basis for smooth group communication. Okay, so now let's jump into some little tricks for avoiding conflict. So a talking stick. There's a little one on the side, which is like a new version of a traditional talking stick. And I'm sure some people on the call have used them before. But the idea is you take the object, and the person who has the object gets to speak, and no one else can speak. And you agree on that in advance, right? So you don't have to worry about interrupting or having to be the bad guy telling someone else that they shouldn't be interrupting someone else, or, you know, you're interrupting me because you're a man, or whatever. It doesn't even happen because you've all agreed to use talking stick from the beginning. So this is the kind of thing that you could pull out at a certain time. Someone could suggest it, right? Like everyone starts talking over each other, and you're like, oh, let's do a talking stick. And you can have something fun or a cool object that you create that you really use on a regular basis, like the one on the left. I mean, it doesn't have to look like that. It could be whatever you want it to look like. Or you could use a ruler or a pen or a notebook or some object that people love this. People love holding it in their hand and speaking, and everyone listens to them. So that's something that's a tool that can be used when people start talking over each other and not everyone feels heard, right? So like one person is dominating and trying to force their opinion down everyone else's throat. The talking stick can be good for that. Council style is you don't need a physical talking stick to do it, but that refers to when you go around the circle. Everyone sits in a circle, and you go around and every person speaks on the topic. So you ask a question like, well, what do you think we should do? Do you think we should put our energy into the march or into the We the People Listen campaign? Not that things have to be either or, for an example. And then instead of the loudest person in the group going forth and talking about how they have to do the march or whatever, you say, okay, we're going to do this council style. Every single person speaks. You go around the circle. People are free to pass and say, I don't have anything to say, pass to the next person. But there's a blocked out spot when it comes around to a person for them to speak, and it's their expectation and their opportunity to speak. So that's one way that you can, this is a way that you could deal with dominating personalities, right? And I'm outgoing myself, right? I'm a talker. I'm energetic. I talk a lot. There are people that way. You don't have to hate them for it, even if it can be disruptive. But you need techniques like this that without hurting anyone's feelings or without feeling really resentful about the person who's trying to dominate the conversation, you can pull them out. Everyone knows what it is because you've already talked about what a talking stick is. And then you just pull it out and go for it. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going to do that. And you can have a moment where you just start doing that. And it helps people. All right. Okay. Icebreakers and trust games. This also, when there's sort of a resentment of one another and a lack of trust, lack of affection for others in the group, that kind of, some people come in and all they have, their whole energy is just like anxiety, and they're just pissed off, and they're rushing, and they're hungry, or they're, whatever. They're just not in a good place coming into the meeting. It's worth it to do icebreakers and trust games. This one on the right there looks pretty dramatic. I don't know about that one, but there are, this is the big book of team building games. I have not read it. This is something I found online, but there are lots of websites, and we do have links to that actually on the communication conflict resolution page, which will tell you how to navigate on the website. You'll find these. And it can be as simple as tossing something around, cutting the ball of string, tossing it from person to person. I'm sure some on the call have participated in these kinds of icebreakers before. It makes a huge difference. It just changes the mood in the room. You're playing for whatever it is. It only has to take 2 minutes, and it just changes the entire experience. They can be very, very simple, or they can be elaborate, and they are very effective. I can tell you that from personal experience. And yeah, if you're organizing a meeting, don't be afraid to take it on. If you stand up there and say in your confident voice, and now we're doing this icebreaker, people will do it, and they will enjoy it, even if it seems childish or whatever. People really like icebreakers and trust games, and they change the way it just creates. People are just friendlier to each other. They actually trust each other more, and just behave in a more familiar, patient way with one another after you've done a game like this. It's just the way it works. So I highly recommend icebreakers and trust games. On Move to Amend phone calls, we do on the national level, we always do a check-in where each person goes around and checks in and says how their day was and says something that's going on with them today. Like Caitlin would say, I got married yesterday. And we'd all be like, whoa, Caitlin's a real person and, got married. And then you start to, it just brings in the rest of people's worlds and personalities in a way that helps communication. Although I'm not in love with the check-in as a technique. I think icebreakers and trust games are better because if people come into a meeting stressed out and it feels like a chore, sometimes the check-in just becomes this venting session where everyone says how stressed out they are. I think icebreakers, a fun icebreaker, is kind of a win-win. But check-ins are good too. To not just jump into the meeting and be all business. It's worth it to take a few minutes at the beginning, 5, even 10 minutes, if you have an hour-long meeting, to do an icebreaker. Okay. These are also good these are kind of facilitation tools. So if you go on the website, there are some facilitation guides for more formal facilitation, like meeting facilitation, where people add things to the agenda. There are various levels of formal facilitation techniques. But sometimes sometimes your group works on a more familiar level. You don't want it to be stifling, and you don't want it to feel super controlled either, unless, of course, you're in a big meeting with lots and lots of people, and you need it to be that way. But, again, similar to the talking stick, a timekeeping tool can be a great way to keep things running smoothly and avoid those conflicts, avoid the conflict where everyone's rolling their eyes because so-and-so is going on and on. Or you only have 10 minutes left, and you need to make it happen with quickness and finish the meeting in 10 minutes, and people can't help themselves but ramble on and on about the topic. You're going to want to use a timekeeping tool. Okay, so it's same rules apply to everyone. So say we're opening the discussion on the colors we're going to wear for the march on Saturday. Okay, get on stack. People can get on stack in line to speak, and we're going to do a 2-minute time limit. How does 2 minutes sound to everyone? And then people can jump in and say, oh, I want to do 3 minutes, or just keep it to 1 minute. We have to leave in 30 seconds, or whatever. So you decide on an amount of time, set an amount of time each person has to speak, and somebody has a timekeeper. And in a perfect world, ideally, you also have somebody to give a very soft, fun, ambient noise of some kind when the person has gone to their time limit. So someone doesn't have to jump in and say, time, or hold up. You can hold up a sign. But if you have a sign, make it a funny sign. Otherwise, use a sound maker of some kind. Harmonicas work great. I've seen those at poetry, actually at moth story slams. If anyone's ever been to one of those, it's people have 5 minutes to tell a story, and it's a juried event. And at the end of 5 minutes, they start doing different noisemakers, and harmonicas work great. If you're sharing it with a group, it might not be the most sanitary choice, but it's just that soft sound of like, and it kind of knocks the person out of their thing, and they're like, oh, I better wrap it up. But it's not aggressive at all. Again, it's to be expected that people will go over. That's why you plan for it by having, we're not robots, that's why you plan for it by having a fun instrument to remind people that their time is over. But still, talk in advance about the fact that we need to take this seriously. So when your time's up, your time's up. Everyone agrees to that in advance. Then you shake the shaker when their time's up. So yeah, this is like a little cheap hourglass. You can use the hourglass. You can get those in 3 minutes. You can get those at different times. Little colorful plastic hourglasses that like you have in a board game. You can use somebody's watch and rotate. And just be kind and polite to people, right? Some people just talk a lot. Be kind and polite. Be open about the fact that some people are very quiet and don't say the amazing thoughts that are in their head. Some people talk constantly because that's the only way they can think is by talking out loud. And just rotate roles for these things so that there are no bad guys. So one person who has a personality and is thinking, gee, we should really say on the agenda, which you should, is stop always being the one to say, can so-and-so wrap it up? Or everyone starts getting resentful of so-and-so because they talk too much. This is a great tool to have in your tote bag, to have in your move to amend supplies for your group. Can be very inexpensive. But yeah, have fun with it. Have fun with it. This is a good way to anticipate, again, over talking. Caution, this can be a magical formula. Okay, vomping. You say it vomping. This is an acronym for bigger conflicts. So say there's an actual conflict between two people. Like somebody hurt your feelings or did something that really was disruptive and a problem. This is a technique that can deal with an actual conflict between two people. This works for anyone, for anything. I mean, this can work for lots of conflicts, not just in move to amend. But this is a real deal. If two people have issues with one another, to find the common ground using a format. Every move to amend group should have gone over this, so that and say, you know what, when somebody says, I need to vomp with you, or let's vomp, or they'll know what you're talking about, and you just go for it. Just say, okay, yes. And if anyone was part of the education curriculum, you may remember the reading, which is talking about taking criticism as a gift, which is you're receiving another perspective, and you need to just take that as a gift, and that's the best way to deal with it. And to feel this, and to offer criticism in the same way as if you're giving that person a gift, you're giving that person your insight. So to take the resentment and the anger out of it, and have it come from a place that's more removed and that's more caring, and so you're really able to be successful and come out of it with a better understanding of one another and a better relationship, a stronger connection. Okay, so vomping. This is in 4 parts, and they are vent, own, empathize, and plan. This is outlined on the website. There's a funny story, which you can read. I think it's funny. I wrote it. I didn't come up with this technique, though. This is a really well-known technique and well-loved technique. There's a story on the communication conflict resolution page of this, of like a play style where this is going back and forth as a dialogue, as an example. So you can read that in your group, and it's humorous, and you'll all remember and learn the steps for vomping. So the way it works is you have 2 people, and you follow the steps. One person starts, and the other person listens. So while one person's speaking, the other person listens attentively and sincerely, because our goal is to stick together, and we plan to do that in advance, and we're not gonna let anything get in our way, because we have a really big task ahead of us. So we're gonna listen to one another, because that's how we're gonna resolve this conflict, right? So the first person vents. So the example I used was someone throwing stinky socks around a hotel room. And so the first person vented, your stinky socks are keeping me up at night. I'm having nightmares. Then the other person vents. And they say, like, you're so uptight, you're such a clean freak, I feel claustrophobic, or whatever. So you have the two people who vent, coming from their I statements, from I perspectives, like, I feel this way, and they get it all out. You're really honest, and you get it all out. You tell the whole situation. I felt this way when you did this, I felt this way, and you use specific examples. And you get it all out there. Then the other person gets it all out there. Okay, then it's the next step, which is owning. The first person now owns. They've listened attentively to what the other person said, and they own their part in the conflict, because a conflict always has two parts to it. It's a conflict of two people. The conflict can't exist in a vacuum. You are conflicting with the other person. The other person is conflicting with you. It's two-sided. You have to recognize that. So you have to own your part in the conflict. So in the story, the person with the stinky socks says, I put them in I just have stinky feet and, whatever. I can't remember. But you own what you've done wrong, basically, or who you are, or even just, I'm a messy person. I'm sorry, I'm a messy person. I've always been this way. And you tell about, you recognize your part in the conflict. Both parties do that. And then the third part is to empathize. So this has to be real and sincere too. You sincerely empathize with the other person. You've heard their story. You've heard how they felt. You've heard them be honest and own their part in the conflict. And then you empathize with them. You say, I understand, Jessica, that my stinky socks have been giving you a headache. That must be horrible. I used to get migraines when I was little because I had allergies, and it was terrible. I feel really bad that that's happening to you. I'm sorry. You empathize with their perspective. And, Jessica would say something about the stinky socks to me and be like, wow, it must be hard to be such a disorganized person, like you told me when you were owning up to things that you have such trouble being on time, and it just must be really hard for you. I'm sorry that I've always been organized. I've never, experienced that. So you just empathize back and forth. And then you plan. And you come up with a plan to solve the problem. So next time I'm going to do this. Next time you're going to do this. In the future we're going to do this. And so it's like, in the story that I wrote, it was like Jessica, who was leaving the door open, so the dog was coming in and getting the socks all over the floor. Like, Jessica agrees to close the door, and I agree to put my socks in the hamper. And so, you come up with a plan. This works really, really well. Trust me. If you've heard of it, you may know this already. If you haven't, you should try it. You can even practice in your group, like in your meeting, you can practice with a goofy scenario. Write up a scenario. You might even be able to find some online. You can look at our scenario, which I did a terrible example of it on the call just now. But you can come up with a funny scenario and then practice stomping, so people become familiar with it. And again, you remove from the actual people, and you realize we're all just people, and we're going to have conflict, and we all have these weird quirks, and we're going to work them out. So that's a strong tool. That's a big one. We also have lots of resources on the website for this kind of thing, right? So the way you get into the Take Action Toolkit, which has the Communication and Conflict Resolution page, is you go into the Take Action Toolkit, and then on the right-hand side, there's going to be the different headings, and you'll click on Organizational Structure and Group Process. Organizational structure and group process is, you would VOMP in private. You would definitely VOMP in private. Thank you for that question, Kit. That's really important. So it doesn't become a group thing where you call someone out in front of everyone. You be a grown-up, and you go over to that person at an appropriate time and say, may I please speak to you? That's a really, really important thing, because it's something that that doesn't always happen. I mean, and you learn that from mean teachers who yell at you in class when you're a kid. But the appropriate thing to do if you have a conflict with someone is to approach them directly, and that's the kind of situation in which you'll get the honest answers, and you'll get that. And that takes courage, because this is hard work, and it takes courage to come together in a group and figure this stuff out. So yeah, you would pull someone aside and ask them that, and they would know exactly what you were talking about. They wouldn't think you were crazy. What do you mean zombies? Because you've already had a group meeting where you went over it. So resources on the website, right? Take action toolkit, organizing structure, and group process is the tab. Under the organizational structure and group process, there are a lot of articles, a lot of good articles. Review these. Again, conflict may seem like it's just horrible and you just can't stand the person, but when you start reading these documents, other things may come to light, like something like a talking stick, like, oh, a talking stick might actually help us. Gee. And then the affiliate organizing guide has group structure, right, which can take a lot of these burdens. I mean, there are the interpersonal things, there are the meetings just kind of going astray to the point where it doesn't feel worth it to be part of the group or participate, and people just leave because it's just one guy talking all the time or whatever. That does happen. But then there are the bigger issues of, say, one person doing all the work all the time. Those kinds of structural issues are going to have to be. You're going to have to look at documents like Choose an Organizational Structure and the Affiliate Organizing Guide. For the more personal stuff, you're going to want to look at tips for good meetings. You're going to want to look at the communication and conflict resolution page. So there's kind of the two sides to it. There's the basic organizational structure, so you don't set yourself up for failure. You don't set yourself up such that one person's going to burn out and other people are just going to be tangential and inconsistent and kind of unrelated, and then say you accomplish your goal of testing the city council thing and then the group disbands. That's going to be dealt with from the structural level. The personality issues are going to be dealt with on some of these communication tools level. So there are a lot of good resources on the website. There are also external resources. This is a great book called Nonviolent Communication. Has anyone read it? It's a very good book on communication. Again, on finding common ground. It's well loved also. Internationally well loved. It's been translated into many languages, and it's just a good book. It's not required reading, obviously, for Move to Amend, but if you're having trouble with this kind of thing in your group, nonviolent communication could be a good read and might help you out. There are also, be creative, searching for other resources. For things like the trust building games, other conflict resolution resources, because we have to be committed to making it work. And that takes a little bit of creativity and reaching around for the resources that are available. I mean, some of this stuff will benefit outside parts of your life as well, and these are the kinds of tools that person-to-person, face-to-face skills that we need to build a really strong movement that's cohesive and unco-optable and internally strong. We need personal connections that are strong. And then as MTA, some things are not up for debate. So there are certain conflicts that come up in affiliate groups sometimes, which are not up for debate in a move to amend group. This is a shout out to Salt Lake City for this cool banner, Human Rights for Human Beings Only, Move to Amend. So I'll go back to that because this is, like our amendment is not up for debate, right? When you sign on when you're participating with Move to Amend, you are going to promote our amendment, which has two parts, which we reviewed at the beginning of the call. Artificial entities are not eligible for constitutional rights, and political spending money is not speech. So that's that. That's it. Those things are not up for debate. So none of that should be coming into no rah-rah, let's just overturn Citizens United people. that's fine. They can go to quite literally, they can go to another group. If you want to convince them to get on board with our amendment because it goes to the root cause of the issues, and they want to overturn something that goes back to 2009, and we want to overturn something that goes back to 1886, that's fine. All due respect to them. Very seriously, all due respect to them and their idea and their strategy that they think is going to solve the problems that we face. That's not MTA's platform. That's not our strategy, and that's not the work that we're doing. So as an MTA group, everyone, just as a bottom line, is on board for those elements. So that kind of thing shouldn't even be coming up. And that's good because that's why we came together, right? So these things are our common ground, our basic common ground, right? So these are our core principles. Which when you really look at them, go beyond just the amendment, and they go beyond just Part 1 and Part 2. MTA's core principles are sixfold. First, accountability and responsibility, both personally and organizationally. So that really comes up to when we're talking about commitment. Getting a commitment from people, and when they say they're going to do something for the group, that's a move to amend core principle. So being organized in that way, such that when someone has a task, they take on those roles and they rotate through the roles and they do that work and they're honest about their capacity, like how much they can volunteer, how much time they can devote. That's actually a core principle of move to amend. Accountability and responsibility, both personally and organizationally. And organizational responsibility, that's what we're sort of just talking about. And then personal responsibility and accountability is between people, right? So it's a core principle to be personally accountable. So if someone does come up to you after a meeting and say, hey, it really bothered me when you interrupted me during the meeting, you are accountable to that person as part of MTA. That's part of your job. You can be a jerk at work, or you can be a jerk to your family. I hope you aren't. But at MTA, it's actually part of the core principles that you have accountability and responsibility personally to the other people personally who are in your group. So, and that's basic. So this ties in, right? So when someone just says, you know what, I'm throwing my hands up and I'm walking out, that's not embodying accountability and responsibility. And this isn't, I'm not saying this so that to start pointing fingers at people, but just to really soak that in and to review that. Because groups need to be aware of this. Affiliate groups need to be aware of these core principles, because that's what makes us a coalition. Otherwise, we'd just be a bunch of random people. This is our core coalition principles. So you've got to have that accountability and responsibility for tasks, both on a personal level and on the organizational level as a member of the group. Then B, transparency. In a lot of cases, the groups are small, so it's like it becomes a matter of sort of personal honesty, and the democratic leadership article goes into this a little bit, but it becomes a question of kind of information sharing more than anything, I think. But what transparency means. The funding should be transparent. What this is going to look like, issues with this aren't going to look like conspiracy theory. What they're going to look like is one person who does a lot of work and other people don't know what's going on. Or it not being up in the open where, say, the funds and the donations go to, or who does what work. That's all about transparency. So if one person's burdened with all the work, like that needs to be out in the open. That needs to be clearly known. The workings of the group need to be transparent. And then community. So we're talking about the trust building and the games coming in and being kind to one another. Community is a core principle of Move to Amend. So it's fine if you support the amendment. But if you're not on board with community as one of the principles, you're also not on board with Move to Amend. Move to Amend has a community as a core principle. So having that personal kindness and that social connection is important. We're a community of people, and you need to develop that, and you should be developing that. And it's not a waste of time to do an icebreaker or to say, hey, who's going to bring the snacks next time? that's not actually a distraction. Obviously, you should get through the agenda, but at the same time, people need to eat and joke and stuff. So, community is, yes, interesting. Yeah. This is a very good comment from Michael in Arizona about transparency. That's something that he's saying it can be difficult to know which people to copy on what things and to accomplish the transparency and community thing. I'll just add the insight here with, the email threads are a nightmare, right? Who wants to get a bunch of emails like that? Be smart about how you use your communication. Be really smart about it. Have regular meetings so that you know when you're going to see each other face to face. Community is not something that, let me say this quite clearly, community is not something that happens online, in my opinion. Some people may have, actually a big study just came out about this, the fact that social networks don't give people the same sense of human fulfillment as face-to-face interactions, as wonderful as they may be. So the transparency thing needs to be more like an update at the beginning of meetings. And if someone can't show up to the meeting, or a once a month email that goes out with the funds, or just a plan that this is where the funds are kept, this is the treasurer who's dealing with the funds. Look at the group structure. This should not be sent out on a crazy email chain where everyone's sending emails all day. That's horrendous. It should be, we don't want to be spamming each other, but the record should be there. It should be available. You could use something like a Google document that's accessible to everyone, depending on, what email servers people use. A document that's accessible to everyone online, as a place to record roles and things like that. There are different techniques for that, but who knows? Maybe a future webinar we should research into how to do transparency specifically. But look at the group structure stuff, because there you'll see roles and you'll see bylaws and things like that for creating stuff like transparency without people just trying to take it on themselves. Which would be like, sending information back and forth and having everyone included. You can have organizational transparency without that kind of messiness and over-involvement. It's just that information is accessible, if you want it. And then movement building. Movement building. This is an issue, right? So when somebody wants to just go to the legislature, or just overturn Citizens United, or just do this, or just do that, that's fine, because that's part of Move to Amendment submission is moving towards, those are ways that we move towards the amendment. But a core principle is movement building. We need a people's movement. Don't think that you can amend the Constitution by writing a letter to the editor. You cannot. You cannot. That's the analysis of the national leadership team, who is very experienced. You cannot amend the Constitution, and if we've been studying together on the education curriculum, looking at historically how constitutional amendments have taken place, you need a massive people's movement of people, of pushing of people in society who are aware of these issues and pushing for the amendment. So we're committed to movement building. And that's so remind, you can use that. If someone's just driving for really cut and dry, don't outreach to anyone, but the three of us are just going to write a bunch of letters to the editor and go to the town meeting and speak up every time, that's not including movement building. And we need to build a movement. There needs to be outreach. There needs to be communication. There needs to be education. That's a core principle of Move to Amend. Next, dedication to Move to Amend, mission, goals, and tactics. We already went over that. The mission of Move to Amend is to pass We the People amendment. The goals are passing the amendment, and beyond that, constitutional renewal and genuine democracy and responsive government in the United States. It's responsive to the popular demands and popular needs. And tactics. That refers to the movement building, for example. Our tactics are to use our principles, are to use affiliate groups, are to move in this way to build popular education dedication and support around our amendment. That's move to amend tactics. So these aren't, these core principles can be referred to and can cut through some of the conflicts that come up in a group where someone thinks that their way or the highway and is trying to come in and bowl over everyone else's opinion or derail the group from actual mission of move to amend, which is, this looks brief, but these 5 core principles cover a lot. So dedication to move to amend mission, goals, and tactics. Again, amend the Constitution with our 2 parts, not some other amendment, not some other amendment, but the 2 parts of the move to amend We the People Amendment. Again, the goals are, yes, to amend the Constitution, but our greater goal is really about equality and constitutional renewal and responsive government. Last, tactics are movement building. Right now, that's why I included at the beginning of this presentation the piece about the fact that our primary target right now is a population. That's why we have a radio show. That's why David Cobb is probably sleeping on someone's couch tonight, giving a presentation, 2 presentations tomorrow on the road somewhere, driving around the country on a barnstorming tour. Because we're trying to build a movement. Last, commitment to anti-oppression within ourselves, communities, workplaces, policies, and representation. So anti-oppression is not a popular term. It is not a household term. It's sort of come out of social justice work. So it's actually it's a jargony term. Let's just be honest. It's a jargony term. Anti-oppression. But what it means is that we have a social analysis. We recognize the history in this country. We recognize the oppressive patterns in our society. We recognize sexism. We recognize it. We recognize the history of racism in this country and the continued reverberations of that. The ongoing, echoing, long, deep history of that. We recognize that, and we're committed to dismantling that because we don't like oppression. We don't like it when one is dominating another. We like human equality and we like democracy. That's what we like. So we don't like domination in that way. Like I said, someone might have a quote-unquote dominating personality, might talk a lot. That's not the same. In a group, that might make it hard for others to speak. It's not the same as this kind of oppression. We need to come up, again, we're talking about structure. We need to come up with systems so that that kind of oppression is not happening. And we need to go into our minds and think about it and dismantle it. That's part of what the education curriculum is about. So, and on the national level and different affiliate leaders, there's discussion right now about how to make this happen, because it does take work, and it takes thinking, and it takes reflection, and it takes change. Inner change and outer political change in our political system, which is what we're going for right now. So, commitment to anti-oppression. It's a core principle of move to amend. It always has been. It always has been. So, if someone's saying it's a distraction, they're not on board with the core principles, and that's honestly not up for debate. It's just not up for debate. We are anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-classist group. We recognize those oppressions in society, and we are actively working to dismantle them as people and as an organization, as part of our work. So these all come together. You can't have one without the other. These are move to amend core principles, and you should know them. You should celebrate them. You should have them be a part of your group and use them. Use them as a place a place to go to, as a place to lean on, and because it can help you. Sometimes things do seem confusing, and a conflict does arise, and if you refer to these principles, it may actually help both parties figure out where to go, or help the whole group figure out where to go, and just take a little perspective. Because while the mission part, the amending the Constitution part, is a part of core principle number 5. That would be mission and goal. That's really where the constitutional amendment falls into. It falls into principle number 5 under mission and goal. And there's all this other stuff, right? So it's bigger. Move to Amend is way bigger than just the mission and the goal. There's all this other stuff. And that's the core. That's your common core. That's your platform as a group. This whole thing is your platform as a group. And that's our platform as an organization. And the leadership and the big, beautiful, broad coalition of dedicated, devoted, passionate leaders who came up with these principles were very much aware of that and believe at their heart of hearts that A, they don't want to be part of a group that doesn't have these principles, and B, that we need these principles in order to pass the amendment and in order to succeed at our goals. And I believe that too. You need to look holistically at it. We need to have this holistic. Community does matter. Transparency does matter. Accountability and responsibility really matters, because without that, you have pretty much nothing. Commitment to anti-oppression is so critical. We're talking about the United States. We are talking about the United States Constitution. We're talking about this history. We're talking about these 300 years, these 400 years that we're dealing with. We're talking about our Constitution. These things are very related. Race is huge. It is huge in this country. It is huge politically. We have to recognize that. And, and so you can always come to these. These are the core principles, and they should be a bottom line for helping to resolve conflict, and remembering coming back to that place where you do have common ground. It's a place to come back to, and when you vow to stick together, commit to the group, and all those things, this is the place where you're going to come together and be. So that's all I got, folks. And we've had some questions during the presentation. And Michael has just made a comment. He's saying the coordination of effort as well as core principles are so important. I was involved in Occupy, and it was a mess. Yeah, Occupy was really disorganized. It was a big, loud expression. It was very expressive, and it was huge, and it happened. And was a real show of frustration and passion on the part of the American people in this country. But it's true. Organizationally, most local occupations have not survived in a serious way. Even I was in New York City at Occupy Wall Street, and similarly, yeah, just because the principles were different, right? It was very much those who called Occupy Wall Street, which of course many people responded, but it was this it was kind of an anarchist roots group and culture of which is much more complex than that, and who's we need to study the anarchist scholars in the United States who were many of them involved in the populist movement that Move to Amend upholds and looks to for inspiration and history. The populist movement around the turn of the century was amazing, and a lot of that philosophy, has sort of come through in threads. But there was a serious anti-organization thing going on, and that's not how we're trying. We're trying to be organized in a different way. Right. So Margaret's saying Occupy was not an organization with outpouring. It changed the conversation, and I wish we would stop criticizing it for being something it wasn't meant to be. We're an organization, which means, yeah, I don't think anyone was criticizing Occupy. I'm sure. Let's see. Keep saying it was a mess. A hot mess. No, I'm certainly not criticizing Occupy Wall Street at all. At all. I got involved with Move to Amend through Occupy Wall Street. No, none of that. No criticism. Let's see. So Jessica, do we open up a phone call? Do we open it up so that people can be heard speaking, or do we just keep doing it this way?
Well, the way I have the webinar set up is such that everyone's phone will stay muted. But if you do have any questions, please do submit them in the chat bar. Let's see, Kit. Okay. I'd like to shed webinar at one of our meetings. Do you have suggestions for how to best present the idea?
Oh, let's see. We missed Phyllis, though. We missed Phyllis. I highly advise groups to deal with issues when they occur if one waits, they fester and get harder to deal with. And personally, I have been so tired in the 2 years I've been involved with Move to Amend of being told just to ignore a person who is basically harassing me. I will not belong to an organization that allows one member to harass another. Very good. And Move to Amend, you look at the principles, there is that personal accountability and there is that community, and that's got you covered, Phyllis. So you should feel comfortable saying, we need to deal with this. And that's why we're having this webinar, because yes, that's not acceptable. It's not an acceptable way to be running a group. But it does take a lot of courage, and it does take a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of empowerment on your part to come into that relationship with the kind of distance and the kind of security that you need in order to be able to deal with it. But we're trying to support that by emphasizing these issues and giving you the tools for it. But it's hard when a group has been going for a long time and they may have a totally different culture and may not be participating in the grassroots movement education curriculum or anything like that, and just lose cannon off on its own. And you're the only one we've had some people on the education calls who they're the only one in their group participating, and the other group's just off in its own universe and not necessarily the most positive group to be a part of, or group to be a part of. So yeah, these are important things to think about. But you're totally recognized in that, and recognized by the national team in wanting to have a positive environment and being respected and being treated with respect. That's part of Move to Amend's core values, period.
And Phyllis, I want to...
Go ahead, Jessica, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I think there's a delay. I just want to say that I really agree that it's best to deal with issues when they occur and not let them fester. It's really easy to like avoid issues and let them sit, and maybe 3 weeks later you have your next meeting and you're still like soaking in this, and then work doesn't get done. I feel like one of my favorite things about Move to Amend is that we really have a culture of dealing with things when they happen. I've been in situations here in the national office where something comes up. Something happens, there's a little bit of a conflict. We will cancel meetings, we'll drop calls, whatever it takes. We're going to deal with this right now, because we can't move on and be sincere in the work we're doing if this isn't dealt with. We cannot work in an environment where there are things festering. And so I really do highly encourage you to deal with things as they come up. And one thing we always say is, like, be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's okay. It's really scary, and it takes a lot of courage, as Robin said, to deal with these issues. But you're either going to be uncomfortable because there's this festering thing in your group, or you're going to be uncomfortable because you're going to someone and dealing with a conflict. So you might as well make it productive if you're going to be uncomfortable, and get comfortable with these ways of dealing with conflict and deal with them right away. And don't let them sit, because that affects our work, and really we're here to get this done. So I appreciate that, Phyllis. Absolutely make it a priority. Conflict resolution should be a top priority.
And as new groups come on, I'll just comment, right? A lot of Move to Amend, right? Groups have been around for 2 years, over 2 years, since the beginning of the organization, and this all wasn't worked out. Maybe we weren't brilliant and didn't anticipate all the conflicts with the affiliate groups or whatever. But now we're wisening up. We're realizing this stuff, and it's gonna be included. So when a new person sends in a request to become an affiliate from some town in Utah, we're gonna send them back the information and be like, oh, by the way, you have to do this, this, and this. And one of the things you have to do is deal with conflicts, providing people with these tools from day one, from the very beginning, before these things are allowed to fester. Right. And then Kit's question. Jessica was starting with Kit's question. Do you want to read Kit's question, Jessica?
Okay, Kit's wondering about how to present the idea of presenting the webinar. Kit, I would say, going to the group at the next meeting, letting them know that this is something that, Fresno is a pretty new group, going off of just what I know about it. So going to your group saying this is something we should hold a meeting about, and there are these resources, and just sort of bringing up the idea that in order to establish this group appropriately and responsibly, that, we should have a meeting about conflict resolution and just sort of put it out there as part of the setup of the group. It's really foundational to running a group. Does that answer your question?
And I'll add some comments to that too. I would recommend before, as you propose that, directing people to that part of the website, so to the Take Action Toolkit, and then to go back to the directions there, Take Action Toolkit and Organizational Structure and Group Process. There's tons of articles under that. So I would recommend you yourself going in, if you're going to be the one to sort of bottom line this and take this on, I'd say send out to your group this page, the link to this page, the Organizational Structure and Group Process page. Suggest people browse it, if they have time, before you have the special meeting or just in general. And then whoever's taking it on the job of preparing for this, you might want to, if you have time, you might want to volunteer to be the one saying, hey, I attended this webinar from my national, it was really great, and volunteer to do it. Then if you have access to a printer, you can you can browse through these documents and print out the ones that you think are especially relevant. And then I would say print out the communication and conflict resolution page on the website. Just if you have to copy and paste it in order to make it print outable, do that. And then you can use that as a reference. It goes through all the things, talking stick, even goes through some other stuff that I didn't include in the webinar. It goes through a few other little tricks like that. And there's a funny example of vomping, which, like I said, I butchered it when I was trying to talk about it on the slide. But it's a full story, and you can read it. You can pass it around. One person can play one character. One person can play the other. So I would say do that. And if you want to share this webinar, which is getting kind of long, you can share the recording, and you'll have access to that through the webinar archive. So just type webinar into the search bar on the Move to Amend website, and you should be able to find it. So pass. Any other questions or thoughts on this? Did people enjoy the webinar? Fishing for compliments now. No, but seriously, was this helpful? Because we heard so many stories of conflict, and we're just trying to figure out how to best help people and how to best what kinds of resources can help with this, because it's sad, it's terrible to hear groups splintering because of this stuff. Okay, yes, great, awesome, very helpful, good. Okay, great. Closing remarks, Jessica?
I just want to say thank you for being here and for dedicating time to talking about how to deal with conflict. It's really important, and so thank you for everyone who's here. I hope that this can permeate into the culture of your affiliates. And if you have any questions or need help putting these things in practice, give us a call at the office. We have those phone calls all the time, and we'd love to find a way to help you facilitate conflict resolution.
And I want to, this is Robin, I want to totally empower everyone, and I really hope that everyone goes back to their group and shares the message of this webinar, and bring some of the tools to the group. We could also, if you request, I think we could also send you the slides. We could send you the PowerPoint version of the slides if you want to give the presentation yourself. That's another idea for you, Kit, and anyone who wants to bring this back. We could do it that way, so you don't have to actually listen to me jabber on and on, but you could just whiz through it yourself. That's something we can do as well if you email in that information.
This is also something we can run as a barnstorming tour. If we're Kit, we're coming to Fresno. We are touring all over the country all the time. So it's something we can do. We can do a workshop on if we're in your area. This is a major priority for us. So let us know if there's anything we can do to help out. Okay.
Let's see. Okay, first, Michael in Arizona is saying he put his email in to log in. Jessica, can you identify his email and send him the PowerPoint?
That's a good question, Michael. This is my first time using this program to do a webinar. I'm
Michael,
not sure.
You can also just type it to us right now.
Yeah,
if you just type in your email right now, we can send it to, and anyone who wants the PowerPoint sent to them, type in your email right now. And then we don't have to worry about the technical complications. And Kit, one last indirectly related question, he says, or she says rather, do you know of the National Coalition Building Institute? Gee, I don't know. But from what I know, some of our information from this webinar may have come from them or something, if they're a conflict resolution place. Because we pull the stuff from that page, the organizational, what's this? Okay. The organizational page pulls from a bunch of different groups. Another tool, which I'll just mention right now, which I think is mentioned, it may not be mentioned on the conflict resolution page, is Lumio. I'm going to type it in. You can search it. It's a democratic decision-making tool. It's like a tech startup type thing where you use an online platform, and I believe it's free. It's free. And it helps to make democratic decisions and shows participation and shows support and has different color-coded stuff and is very user-friendly, attractive platform for making democratic decisions. So that's one way you can make decisions sort of outside of a face-to-face setting, which could maybe smooth things over too. And then instead of talking, people can type and people can read it on their convenience. So Lumio is a tool that you can check out as well, and I'll add that to the conflict resolution page because it might be helpful, or to some of our other pages. All right, and then we have Michael's email address at Gmail. Great, and Kit Williams would also like the slides. Kit, please send your email address. Just text it in because Jessica's new to any meeting, and I don't know how to do it either. Just if you type in your email address, we can send it to you. Oh, Jessica has it. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry if I missed that. Okay, very good. So all 9 people stayed all the way through the end. Very good. I guess it's time to say good night or good evening to those of you on the West Coast.
Thank you, Robin. That was great.
Okay, bye, everyone. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for taking the time, and thanks so much for participating. Very important. Peace to you, too. Take care. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Bye. Solidarity to you, too, Kit.